Wondering how you can become better at running your business? Entrepreneurship can be stressful. There's too much to do and not enough time. If you're isolated in your daily decisions, have no fear. Success and balance are possible. Welcome to the Small Business Answer Man podcast, where you master the art of running a successful business using practical advice from experts who want to help you succeed. Now, here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome. We're glad to have you back again this week. I tell you, in this first quarter in 2023, we've been concentrating on how you can improve your business. And I think I found another guest today that's going to help us with that same challenges. How can we continue to improve our business, our people, and really ultimately increase our profits? Today, I want to ask the question of, what problem, Mark, will you solve for our Small Business Answer Man podcast listeners?
Well, given what we've been through the last 2 years with the pandemic and the changes in the workplace and et cetera, it still, I think, is pretty obvious to most business owners the biggest problem they face is turnover. I spent most of my career in broadcasting in football. We hate turnovers in football, and we hate turnover in the workplace too. So I think, the stats speak for themselves. It costs you a third of a departed employee's salary to replace them. That's a lot of money. So what I'm trying to do is help employers understand that the better you treat your people, the longer they're going to hang around.
Well, I know I'm going to like this conversation because I always like talking about people and culture. And Mark Oristano is our guest today, and he's a 30-year veteran of the NFL broadcast journalist, calling games for the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Oilers, and working in the front office of the original Dallas Cowboys. Mark, it is great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Gary, thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, let's get into some of that. We talked about employees and how important that is, and we don't want turnover in football, and we don't want turnovers in our staff for darn sure, because it's so hard to train them. But what are some of those things that you learned in the front office of the original Dallas Cowboys franchise that kind of would apply to business owners and entrepreneurs?
Well, one of the reasons why that original front office was so successful, starting in 1960 with a winless season, they had one tie in 12 games. They lost 11, and they built up a franchise that, as most people know, became known as America's team, love it or hate it. And that was mostly due to two things. On the field, it was due to Tom Landry, the head coach, who was a genius coach. But in the front office, it was Tex Schramm. Texas E. Schramm was his actual name, and of course, we called him Tex. He was the president and general manager. He ran the ship. And he was the one who made sure that everything was done properly off the field, including making sure that employees were happy and stayed around forever, and that turnover was almost a non-factor in the front office, mostly due to his three rules for staffing an organization. I'm sure we can get into those a little more, but basically it's hire the best people you can find, train them your way, and then get out of their way and let them do the job you hired them to do. And with those three rules, Tex built a front office that was the envy of the entire NFL and a lot of other organizations. Companies, all kinds of companies would come to Dallas to study the way we did things in the front office of the Cowboys.
Yeah, I could love that. And I love the philosophy of those three rules. Let's talk about those a little bit, if you don't mind, because today it is hard finding good quality people. And then the other is, they have a lot of options out there to get there. And you talk about hire the best people, train them, and get out of their way. Kind of lay that out. How did that work for you and what you saw in the front office? Because you were part of that front office staff, correct?
Yeah, I guess actually it's kind of an egotistical thing. If the motto was hire the best people you can find, and they hired me, I guess I should be very proud. But the mantra was to don't hire cheap. Don't hire people because they're going to come in for a low salary and not really know what they're doing. It's going to cost you a little more in the front end to hire the best people you can find, but it'll be worth it because they'll hang around long. They'll stay later at the office. They'll come up with better ideas. They'll be enthusiastic. So you want to, it's kind of a duh thing, but you want to hire the best people you can find. The second thing is you train them your way. And in football terminology, if you're the Cowboys and you've signed a new quarterback, you're not going to give him the Los Angeles Rams playbook. You're going to give him your playbook, show him how you do things and why you do them that way. And once they understand that, and they understand the principles behind what they're doing, once you know what the rules are, it's easier to follow. And then the third one, Get out of their way and let them do the job you hired them to do. If you stand there and you're peering over their shoulder all the time and watching it, they're going to feel like mom's watching them do their math homework, and they're going to rebel, and they're not going to do their best job. So if you hired the best and you trained them well, getting out of their way and letting them do the job and not micromanaging should be really easy, because you know that this person is on board and doing what they're supposed to do. And those three rules serve the Cowboys well in becoming one of the great sports franchises in history.
Well, it's kind of interesting, the philosophy that you have, because especially that was given there, because it's really the key today as I'm working with business owners, because when you're talking about hiring the best, you've got to really be different in the marketplace. And when you're looking for that talent, like you said, we're looking for those A players, whatever term you want to use, of the best talent that's available. And that's one thing I'm trying to get my business owners to look at a little bit differently right now, is you may not find someone at the level that you're at. But the cool thing is the marketplace has changed. A lot of times it can be someone that's not in your marketplace and still can be providing that talent. Or, there's a lot of these fractional employees that come in and you're only hiring for that side of it, but they have a skill set that's so much higher than what you can hire in your own marketplace. And I think sometimes for small business owners, they can see that as a challenge. Instead, it should be, they're going to level up the business. And the reason I kind of laid that in is because I'm so curious if the front office staff was like that. You mentioned a little bit, you had definitely a legendary coach in Coach Landry, but what made the franchise so successful off the field as well as on? Because of course the front office can do their job, but it changes when it's kind of that front stage and backstage I've heard talked about before. You all had the backstage covered really well, but you also had a great front stage of the on-field presence.
Yeah, we had, our job in the front office was to make certain that everything was done to make the job of the players and the coaches as easy as possible. You didn't want to have players and coaches like on a Wednesday before a game wondering, well, what time does the charter flight leave and where are the buses going to be? And all that stuff was done months in advance. And actually for us, the football season was easy because it was all planned out and step by step, and every day you knew what you had to do. The off season was a little more crazy because that was when we were planning everything. But the thing is, in today's market, and I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of business people, because of COVID, because of the pandemic, it's become kind of an employee's market. There's a lot more jobs out there than there are people to fill them. So it is, as you said, it's a little tougher to find the right person. But back in the day when I was with the Cowboys, I was there basically from 74 to 85. It was a prime place. Everybody in the country who was in sports wanted to come and work for the Cowboys. But basically what happened was we all knew what our jobs were. We all knew, and it's one of the great quotes in football, Bill Belichick, the Patriots coach, his motto is do your job, right? Works on two fronts. First of all, do your job. Do the job we hired you for. Number two, do your job. Don't try to do somebody else's job. And we all knew what our job was. We all knew what we were supposed to do. It was laid out very calmly and very rationally. And as my favorite quote from any business owner I've ever heard, Tex always used to say that nobody does their best work in a climate of fear. There was never any fear or pressure put on you. If Tex asked you a question, he would tell you when you were a new employee. If I ask you something and you don't know the answer, you can tell me that you don't know, but that you'll have the answer on my desk in 30 minutes. So he was allowing us to not know things. And that made it a whole lot easier to then go hit the encyclopedia or whatever you needed to go to in those pre-internet days and find the answer and have it on his desk in 30 minutes.
Yeah, it makes a real difference, because when people feel comfortable and then they can bring their best self forward and not always have the answers, they're going to make a difference, and it's really going to allow them to be successful in their career. You talked about some of the keys, but I'm curious, you talk about different keys of really in talking about becoming that kind of boss, and you spoke one there of not having the fear. Is there any others that come to mind for you when you worked with it that you think really in the workplace we've got to think about? Because sometimes on business owners, they have a lot of stress. And I'm sure Tex had a lot of stress being the general managers of that franchise. And sometimes our bosses bring their stress to everyone else. So is there any keys to becoming the type of boss that people really want to work for to make that difference in an organization or in a company?
Well, I think you have to understand that the better that you treat people, the better they're going to work, the better they're going to be part of your organization. I found something that was a man named Walt Ettinger, I believe is his name, who's the head of the one of the big investment firms. When he's interviewing a new potential executive for his company, one of the things that he does is he takes him to breakfast at a restaurant. And before the interviewee gets there, he tells the guy running the coffee shop, look, make sure that the waiter messes up this guy's order. Make sure he gets it very wrong. He's not going to get in trouble. I'm going to give him a big tip, but I want to see something. What he saw was when the order was wrong, if the interviewee snapped at the waiter and said, I didn't order this way, blah, blah. Well, you don't want to hire that guy because you know he's a little got an attitude. But if he said, excuse me, I asked for fried eggs, these are scrambled. I don't mean to make trouble. Can we get this? If he's nice and kind to an employee, now you know whether or not you want to have him around your company. And I always thought that was a great way to test. I'm sure Tex probably did something like that to all of us, but I can't, it wasn't breakfast. I can't really figure out what it was. But, you got to, people are people, and the better you treat them, the better you're going to get out of them. It's a very simple concept.
Yeah, that's the key, is taking care of your people, because your people are going to take care of you. Setting that environment you've talked about. It's really, now we talk about culture in the workplace and how critical that is, and realizing that each leader is that critical component, because most people don't leave an organization. They leave their direct boss, their manager.
Yep, absolutely. If I can give you one quick example of two different things. In 1975, I was the weekend sportscaster at the CBS station in Dallas. I've been there 6 weeks. I had yet to meet the general manager of the station. One day, the elevator door opened. I was going to go down to the newsroom, and the general manager was on the elevator reading a newspaper. I got on board. I hadn't met him yet. I said, "Good morning, Mr. Smith." And he peered over the top of the newspaper, and he looked at me for a moment. And then he snapped the newspaper and kept on reading. Never spoke, right? I didn't last very long there. 1976, September 26, 1976. I remember the exact day. The Cowboys were playing the Baltimore Colts, and I was the press box assistant. I was in charge of the radio TV press box. I used to get there 3 hours before the game. This day, I got there 20 minutes into the second quarter, because on that day, my first child, my son Kelly, was born. I had told everybody I probably might be late. They understood it was no big deal. The Tuesday after the game, we always had what we called the Landry Luncheon, where Coach Landry would meet with the media and talk about the games. And on this day, unknown to me, the PR staff would always put out a bulletin at that luncheon with big play awards and things like that, information and statistics on it. Well, unknown to me on this day, at the bottom under big offensive play and big defensive play, it said biggest play of the game, Kelly Robert Oristano, who showed up at Presbyterian Hospital weighing 7 pounds 6 ounces and kept his father away from the game for the first half. After everybody read that, everybody in the room, including Coach Landry and Tex Schramm, came over to congratulate. Okay, which company would you rather work for?
Yep.
Pretty simple.
And knowing the small details and understanding them, making that difference, giving that, and that's I think, a competitive advantage that, I'll be honest, that I feel even smaller organizations have, because I work with business owners and tell them all the time, you make that impact. If you come in and you're growly, guess what? If you have a staff of 5, everybody knows it, and they know what the principle, what's going to be. They're going to kind of stay out of the way today because that person's on the path. So, well, it's great really hearing about it. And really, you talk about a lot of principles, and that's the key to it and stuff. So are the ideals of really the front office is practical for small and even non-sports businesses? We've talked about it. We know that it is, but what are some of those principles that you would share with them? And I know you have a capability, if people want to learn more, they have that capability to be able to do that with you.
Well, I think one of the most important ones is, some people have expressed it by always making sure that you exercise your MBWA, not your MBA, but your management by walking around. Even if you do have a big company, even if you have 1,000 employees, if you meet 10 of them a day, eventually you'll meet them all. And, you can find out little things like who's got a kid going to college or who's trying to buy a house or whatever. And you just, you talk to them about stuff that's not just necessarily related to their job. That's a key. Another key is, you remember the great UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden, who won 10 straight NCAA titles. The first day of every practice at UCLA, the first moment of the first practice every year, Coach Wooden would sit down on the court with his players and teach them how to put their shoes and socks on, their sneakers and socks. They all knew how to do that, right? It was not the bit, but he showed them, you pull them up, you get the seams out. What was he teaching them? He wasn't teaching them how to put their sneakers on. He was teaching them, if you put your sneakers and socks on right, you won't get blisters. If you don't get blisters, you won't lose playing time. If you don't lose playing time, we'll win more games. So if you take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves. And that's another key thing to learn. It's not always about the big, gigantic project. It's about the little things that make that project up. And the better you treat people, the better you get them to work on their part of that project, the better it's going to go. It's really, as I said before, it's pretty simple and pretty basic, but for some reason, it's hard for a lot of people to put into action. I guess because, well, if it's that simple, it can't possibly work. I guess that's the attitude. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And I think sometimes it's just thinking they're too busy. Or to be quite honest, some people think, oh, I'm just not a people person. Well, if you're a leader, a boss, owner of a company, that's a talent, a skill that you can learn. And that's the thing, is you don't have to be the best at it, but you can learn how to be the best at it. I had over 150 employees at one time, and you know what made them feel so special, Mark, was I would call each one of them on their birthday and sing happy birthday to them. Now, I can't sing a lick, but you know what? It wasn't about the singing. It was because I took the time out and specifically call them. And over time, I had, you know, it was easy when there was 10 or 20 with me. But when I had 150, I mean, my leaders knew that by a certain time, by this time, we had phones and text messaging was available. And they would know if I hadn't called them by noon, their job was to text me to remind me. And I normally had all of them on my calendar, but sometimes days you were busy and sometimes I didn't get it to the afternoon. But it became a negative if I didn't do it, because then they didn't feel as special and stuff. And I still have some of the employees I do it with today, and they just love it.
And also the fact that, as you said, you're not the world's best singer, that you were willing to put that out there, showing, hey, look, I'm a human being, right? You know, I can make fun of myself too while I'm doing this to celebrate you. That's a nice trait.
Yep. And it just made it fun. So, well, I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your knowledge that you've gained over the years. And I know you talk about, and you have a course and website about leadwithprinciple.com. Tell our listeners, what will they get out of that if they go take a look, and how they can kind of work with you?
Well, basically, it's an expanded version of what we've been talking about today. It's a step-by-step journey through Tex's rules of how to hire people and how to train them, and the ways that you can make yourself that people person that you maybe feel you're not right now. And I should also add that leadwithprinciple.com is principal with an L-E, not an A-L, because A-L is the school and L-E is principal. But it's just basically it's a very tight, condensed course. I'm a journalist, so I write very small and very tight. I don't take up huge chunks of time. There are 5, 10, 15-minute modules in it where you're going to learn things about why we were so successful and how you can bring that on board your business, whether it's football or trucking or building jet planes or selling insurance. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I'd tell you, go take a look at it. I've checked out the information. Mark has some great information on there. Again, leadwithprinciple.com with the LE, but we will have it in show notes too at smallbusinessanswerman.biz. So you can go there, click to it, you can get all the information, because it doesn't matter if it's sports or if it's business. These principles are the same. It's about people. And Mark and I would agree, the first component is it's first about your people, because if you take care of that side of it, it makes it. And you may say, well, I only have a small staff of 2 or 3. That is even more important. I have a staff of 3 myself. And that is so important, because you have to even get more out of a smaller number than a larger number that's there, but making them feel special. Mark, is there anything else you'd like to share? I truly enjoyed our time together.
The one true mantra, which is what you were just summing up, is it's not about you, it's about the team.
Yeah, great analogy. Comes right back to it. So I truly appreciate you sharing that. I do have one question I'd like to ask you, as I ask every guest, is what is your best business tip or advice you would give for entrepreneurs and business owners?
Don't take yourself too seriously. If you talked before about singing happy birthday to your employees, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. that not only do you want to treat them as human beings, you want them to think of you as a human being. You want them to think of you as a good guy or a good woman or whatever. Just don't be afraid to be fun and be enjoyable and have a good time. There will be times when business is tough. You have to let people go sometimes. That's tough. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a decent human being about it.
Yeah. Well, great advice there. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and wisdom, Mark, with our listeners and business owners and entrepreneurs. As we wrap up today, the one thing I want to challenge you on, how are you leading your team? If you were going to get a grade from each one of your employees, how would you rate from a 1 to 10 scale? What would you rate on that scale? Ask yourself that question and then decide, what actions do I need to change to really lead with principle? And check out Mark's information. He's got some great information up there, and we really appreciate him sharing his time. That's at leadwithprinciple.com. And we'll be back next week with another great guest. So please come join us. Make it a great day. We'll see you next week.
That's all the time we have for this week. To continue your journey, head over to smallbusinessanswerman.biz to access the tools and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who would benefit from listening. That's smallbusinessanswerman.biz. Until next time, remember, when you find the right solutions, your business grows and you get your time back.